Hi, my name is Peter Velleno, winemaker at Castello di Amorosa. I'm here in our fermentation room, and this is where all the wine is made for all of our wonderful Castello wines. Our grapes are received outside on our crush pad, and the big difference between white winemaking and red winemaking is what we do with the grapes on the day of harvesting. With red grapes, we put them through the destemmer and the crusher, and they go into tanks, and the wine is fermented with the grape skins inside of the tank. Whereas white grapes are put into the wine press and separated with the juice from the skins on day one, and then that juice is put into the tank. These taller tanks behind me are white wine fermentation tanks. They're tall and skinny. The red wine fermentation tanks tend to be a bit wider and a bit shorter. With red wine, we are mixing the tanks every day, probably 4 or 5 times a day. There's 2 primary methods. There's the pump over method and the punch down method. With pump overs, we pump the wine out from the bottom of the tank and we spray it over the top. And with the punch down, we use a device to push down on the grapes to submerge the grapes that are floating to the top of the tank. We have to do this because all of the color and the flavors and aromas in a red grape are in the grape skins, and we have to have contact with the wine in order to extract those flavors and colors from the grape skins. With a white wine, the juice is fermenting in the tank, and it's a much cooler process, usually 50 to 60 degrees, and could take a matter of weeks. For a wine like Chardonnay, we put the juice into barrels down in our barrel cellar, and we ferment the juice in our barrels. Other wines, Pinot Grigio, Gewürztraminer, Moscato, those wines are fermented entirely and aged in these stainless steel wine tanks. For the red wines, after fermentation is complete, which will take a week or 2 weeks, we'll separate the wine from the grape skins, put it into these tanks, and then we'll transfer that wine down into our barrel cellar down below, beneath the winery here in the cellars or in the wine cave. And those wines will age in barrels for a period of 1 year or 2 years, depending on the varietal. Pinot Noir is aged for approximately 8 months and bottled before the next harvest. Other red wines such as Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Zinfandel are on a 2-year barrel cycle, which means that they'll go through one vintage in barrels, and then we'll rack them out back into these same tanks and get them ready for bottling before the subsequent vintage. Our barrel cellar downstairs is held at a very consistent temperature, and we can do the same thing with these tanks. We have these jackets on these tanks. We can warm the wine up, cool the wine down, so we have a lot of control over what's going on here. The tanks are outfitted with thermostats that tie into our web-based software so we can monitor everything. At Castello di Amorosa, we try to merge traditional winemaking techniques with more modern techniques when we feel it makes the wine better. Thank you for stopping in our fermentation room, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day and some wines here at Castello di Amorosa.